Welcome to Not Entirely Unlike Tea with Christine Collins. Hey there, it's Christine Collins, and if you have ever been curious about the neuroscientific impact of things like noise and light exposure into your brain, your psychology, your mindset, your mood, and everything really, let's peek at some of those impacts. Environmental factors don't just influence our mood, they are actually changing the structure in our brain and the function of our brain. When it comes to noise, it's not just specific loud noise that we're very aware of, like being at a concert or being close to very loud, noisy construction. There are also things like the constant hum of traffic or noisy neighbors, hearing their TV through a wall or hearing them talking or hearing them doing other things. Things like the HVAC system, the refrigerator compressor, leaf blowers, and various other background noises. Even though our conscious mind may not detect them, it may adapt us to focusing elsewhere, the amygdala doesn't necessarily rule them out. The amygdala, which is our brain's threat detection system, it's connected to anxiety, is always turned on scanning our environment for potential threats or risks to us. Even when we're asleep or focused on other things, the amygdala is monitoring that environment for any potential dangers. And noise in particular, especially when it's unpredictable or uncontrollable, can get registered as a threat. So it'll detect that stressful sound and then send a signal to the hypothalamus, activating our body's stress control center. And then our adrenal glands begin pumping out adrenaline and cortisol. Heart rates may spike, blood pressure may rise, and the body goes into a state of physiological arousal. And that can happen very fast, even in milliseconds, before you're even consciously aware of the sound. The problem with chronic noise exposure, even on a low level, is that that response continues to fire in the background over and over all day long. And unlike our eyes that we can close, we can't close our ears. So your brain is processing that environmental noise 24/7, and so your stress response is being kind of repeatedly activated. And those things can be measured with biomarkers like elevated cortisol, increases in our catecholamines, which is our norepinephrine and dopamine, stress response roles, and things like oxidative stress in the brain. Exposure to something like aircraft noise for a few days can increase levels of stress markers and affect things like vasoconstriction and cardiovascular stress. And over time, the actual structure of the brain can change. Chronic noise is associated with a decrease in connectivity between the prefrontal cortex and the amygdala, so our decision-making, executive function, and then our anxiety center. There can also be reduction in the hippocampus volume, which is critical for memory formation, spatial navigating, moving around, and also contextual learning and understanding. So that might mean an impairment in things like memory and learning. And when there's that disconnect between the prefrontal cortex and the amygdala, we kind of lose some of our rational control center that can tell that anxiety, emotional alarm system to calm down. We lose our ability to kind of down-regulate that stress response. And it can be seen in areas around airports and busy highways where there are some measurable cognitive impairments. Every 10 decibel increase in residential noise can cause an increase in mild cognitive impairment and even longer-term risks for cognitive-related illnesses of the brain. There might even be decreases in things like testing, reading scores, and higher blood pressure over the span of time by living close to chronic residential noise. And there can also be some low-grade brain inflammation, which would also affect cognitive functioning over time, not to mention sleep disruption. And we know from lots of conversations around sleep how important that is for our cognitive functioning. When we have noise during sleep, it can cause these little micro awakenings or brief arousal periods, even if it's only for a few seconds. It actually breaks up our sleep architecture. And as our brain is cycling through different sleep stages, from light sleep sleep to deep sleep to REM sleep, those disruptions can really have a negative impact on our REM sleep and overall cycling. And that's really important for restoration, emotional regulation, cellular repair, memory consolidation. It's obviously very critical that we don't have sleep interruptions. And over time, those sleep interruptions can actually affect things like glucose metabolism, insulin resistance, blood pressure, cellular aging, hormonal disruptions, immune function, cardiovascular issues. So there's a whole range of things that are affected when sleep is disrupted. And while we may think we're consciously tuning out that noise over time, we stop kind of actively noticing it. At a deeper level, there's still a physiological stress response that's happening. Instead of there being a spike in cortisol and then a decrease, it becomes more of chronic cortisol stress over time. And all of that can affect our psychology, our mood, anxiety, depression, the way that we feel day in and day out. Even our reward circuitry. There may be decreased dopamine receptor availability, and even things like production of serotonin. So there's a whole world of things that shift whenever we are experiencing chronic stress that comes from things like sleep disruption and even low-level chronic noise. So it's not insignificant by any means, and neither is light exposure. So that also has a different set of effects on the brain. For example, our brain is very sensitive to things like blue light that are associated with cell phones, laptops, LED lights that kind of send a signal to our brain that it's daytime and we should be staying alert and not resting, relaxing, or sleeping. It can affect melatonin production, which affects our sleep, again, impacting everything else. There's also impacts on the amygdala and the prefrontal cortex, again, emotional processing centers. So on the one side, bright light therapy can be helpful for things like depression, may increase serotonin production or dopamine signaling. So the right light at the right time can be beneficial, especially things like morning light exposure that kind of sets our circadian rhythm for the day. But unnecessary light in the evening, even if it's relatively dim, can interfere with that melatonin production and isn't something that we necessarily adapt to. Throwing off that circadian rhythm can throw off many other body cycles like insulin timing, eating versus fasting, and other types of dysregulation. So underexposure to good bright light, such as morning light, that triggers that circadian rhythm to get on schedule, that can be a positive effect, but the negative impacts of bright light at night when we're meant to be kind of unwinding and getting ready for rest can have some detrimental impacts too. So managing our environment, some things we have choices over and some things we don't. But when we have the opportunity to decide between less noise or more chronic noise, appropriate exposure to light, or problematic exposure to light at night, it's worth considering whether we want to make different decisions in terms of arranging our environment and how we spend our time. Our brains have evolved over a very long time to have brighter days, darker nights, and relative quiet, particularly at night when sleeping. So the closer we can get to some of those patterns and emulating some of those structures might just make us healthier and happier overall. So I hope you found this to be interesting. And if you are seeking some more soothing sounds, things that can help you to get into more of a restful state, particularly as you're unwinding for sleep, it might be worth considering tools like yoga nidra or hypnosis, which can help your body and your mind to unwind, to relax, to get into a restorative state. And I offer all of that in my mindset membership, the Hypno-Pothecary, and all that detail is available to you in the show notes. And until the next time we connect, I wish you the most magical and creative rest of your day. Thanks for listening. This is Christine Collins at RavenMosaic.com.